ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Psychonaut Sessions. This is your host, Daniel Mueller. You may notice a difference in the audio because my last couple of videos, there's some kind of syncing issue with the audio microphone that I was using on my headset and the video itself. So, trying something a little bit different. So I know it's probably not going to be as crisp, but we'll just make do with what we have for now, and I'll keep troubleshooting the issue in the future. So I think it's probably reasonable to say that Psychonaut Sessions is kind of also like a Day Brothers fan club. It's some of the first issues that I really fell in love with going over in this channel were the Black Zeppelin issues by Renegade Press that were a tribute to Gene Day and had many contributions of his brothers David and Dan. The first interview I did on this channel was with David Day, and who's still making beautiful artwork. So I've been waiting to get my hands on this piece for a while. It's another Renegade Press anthology comic featuring the Day Brothers. So, and again, as a recap, you can go look at my Black Zeppelin videos to kind of get a history on Gene Day, but Gene was a very well-known, well-respected artist that worked for numerous small presses, but also did a lot of early work for the Kung Fu Shang-Chi comic. I can't remember the name of it right now, but also Star Wars in the early 80s, and was just well respected across the industry. So this was a comic that was, I don't think it was any kind of tribute to, I think that just the Day Brothers kind of taken off and doing some of their own stuff at this time, and Denis Libera, who was the publisher for Renegade Press, really had a strong relationship with them, and this is kind of that vein of independent Canadian comics coming out during the 80s, which I just really love. That's just like right in my wheelhouse. So really cool double spread cover by David Day, and I know some people would say like this is sacrilege what I'm doing right now, but it's really cool to see. So David Day, you know, in his interview with him, he really leaned on and expressed his interest in just painting more so than actual comics work. We'll see some of his comics work in here, but just he loves painting in general. So, you know, like the Hildebrandt brothers and things like that, that's his wheelhouse for sure. So we get this amazing double page splash cover of these werewolves. Doesn't really correlate with anything in the comic at all, which was kind of indicative of many of the anthologies that came out in the 70s and 80s. It was just a venue for people to showcase their work in a thematic sense. Obviously, we're going with horror. It's the beginning of September. You know, basically the 2 months of Halloween that I celebrate Halloween is here. We actually get our table of contents on the back, which is interesting, and that's okay. But just, I mean, lush. You're really starting to see David Day really fill out here with his life. So I think this came out right after the Black Zeppelin series, which was 86, and so this is 87, and so he's really moving forward with his work. Just vibrant, but also just piercing work. Again, I think the Hildebrandt brothers, he said, were a huge influence in the way they captured light, and they really made it push out and stand out. Some people might say that that brings kind of a more of an illustrative, cartoonish quality to the painting. I don't really care. I don't like to see any kind of like distinction between illustration and art. I just see it all as art. So love it. And so kind of a fun logo. I think they probably could have done something that would have fit with it a little bit more, but it's cool. I like it. And so we get work mainly by David and Dan. Gene passed away at this time, of course. Most everything in here written by Kevin McConnell. I have no idea who Kevin McConnell is. I've done a search. It's not the football coach, Kevin McConnell. So I don't know what else he's done. If anybody out there knows, let me know. Give me a heads up. No editor letter or anything like that. Nothing to describe what the book is like Black Zeppelin did. We just get kind of a back issue and subscription listing from Denis. So that's cool. So we just dive right into it. So this first one is called The Grave Mistake. So, and you know, I don't like to disparage, but I do have like my interests and my things. I don't mind a lot of text. I'm a lot of readers. Text in comics sometimes gets in the way. It can be cumbersome. I actually don't. When it's done well, I think you could have a lot of text and it still be done well. It just depends on the flow of the story and the way the person writes. Kevin McConnell, I think, was meant to more write prose, because he basically is just describing what's happening in the panels, but also it's very 19th century. So he's trying to go for that gothic style of writing, which I don't necessarily think lends itself well to comics after I read this. So I don't mean to be too critical with that. Maybe going through another reread, it'll kind of help and just getting in the flow. For me at first, it was just kind of jarring because the artwork in this is so striking. So what we get here, especially the first couple stories, we get David Day doing the pencils and layouts, and we get Dan Day's inks. Dan Day's inking style is very unique, very detailed, obviously, just frenetic, crazy. I mean, he's just going all out. He's definitely going for that kind of like cross-hatching style that I normally find very difficult whenever I'm trying to do any kind of shading, and I think few people really make it work. I think you know, you just have to know what you're doing. You can't just go into it lazily. And it's obvious that he's been very well trained. Both the Day brothers were coached by Gene Day, from my understanding. So it was kind of a family that all kind of followed Gene in his footsteps, who had an incredible inking style. He knew shading and textures as well as anyone. Right there, he could be right up there with John Romita and Gene Colan, you know, just all of the greats. But yeah, I mean, just every aspect of this is alive, and every aspect of this is detailed. You know, there's the only spaces that aren't detailed are the blacks, with the exception of the moon, obviously. But you still get that dynamic, like foreshadowing feel. You get movement. Nothing just blends into itself. Everything feels three-dimensional, and it has character. So definitely in terms of Kevin McConnell writing within that style, you know, it does fit. So we get introduced to this guy. He's a grave robber, basically. So we just get an introduction to him, and a very flowery introduction with that gothic language. But he basically watches people's funerals and digs up graves to get the jewelry and things that people get buried with, and that's how he survives. Really cool use of whites here in negative space, so it's like he can also use that negative space really well, and it doesn't feel lazy. This is precisely the right way to use that negative space in every sense of the word. And as here as well, where we just get the blacks for just the graves, tombstones themselves. I mean, everything just feels so. That's what I love about the Day brothers, is when you first look at it, you think, well, it's very professional, and succinct, accomplished. But when you dive into the details, it just gets nuts. It gets crazy. There's a level of insanity and intensity that comes with it, and that's a lot of people say that's one of the ways in which Gene Day even died. because of his obsessive quality that he was able to put into the page. So we're just getting this introduction to him, and then again, it's just flowery, but he eventually finds someone who's very rich, and you get the sense that he actually possibly even poisoned him. Attends a funeral, and he always, introduces himself as a friend to the deceased. Really cool split in the page here. Waits for everybody to be gone, and then he comes back at night to dig up. So we get this really cool scene where he comes at night. This is kind of a bird's eye view down as he's digging the grave, and of course we get some amazing foreshadowing of what's to come in terms of this incredible death figure looming behind him as he's digging. And so we get another view of that as well as it continues forward. I mean, this is just very I don't know, Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror kind of just. If you're ever doing a comic like this, you always have to have a scene where there's someone digging a grave with the moon in the background, and it's emblematic. So he opens the coffin, he sees all the jewelry, and he sees the sparkles, he's getting excited, but then, oh no, and you get the sense that he sees something's terrible. A hand comes out, and it's basically a vampire. He picked the wrong grave. Yep. And pretty cool. Grotesque. Probably, could have done something more other than just blacks here, maybe. I don't know, but I'm not complaining. Perfect. What's interesting about this too is you do get kind of some cartoonish lettering that kind of comes from this as well, which I appreciate because I'm a cartoonist. Next one is rather long, but it really, again, it's all about the ink work. So that actually, some of that work reminded me of if it wasn't so realistic, it reminded me a little bit of Rick Geary because he's Victorian artist. But here I was instantly reminded of Mobius's Blueberry work. So we're in the Old West. We get this Dark Rider. We get this, again, multiple lines, but everything works. Nothing seems too messy. It all blends well together. The amazing textures. Drives me nuts how good this is. I just really need to study it more. So we get this Dark Rider who's coming upon a town. Apparently it's a ghost town, so not really understanding what it is. Close up of the stirrup here. He goes down the hill. Just really cool form and motion, sense of motion. He sees a light on in the tavern. So he follows that light. And again, it's a ghost town. And so he busts through, and this is where the text kind of helps a little bit. So he busts through and shoots them down, and they're all shot dead, but then it makes a reference to them still being alive, even though they're dead, and that they've done this multiple times before. These guys that he busted in on playing cards. So the Dark Rider tears his face off, and he is some kind of zombie cowboy rider underneath. Really cool. That is a perfect zombie face for just 100%. Again, you can't do this and just get away with it by being willy-nilly. You really need to make your lines count. I've tried. So we get an introduction to the guys he killed, and they're talking, so they're not dead. So what's going on? So we get thrown into the past here, and it's basically a story. He lived in a town, and the townspeople had their water poisoned by these criminals, and then everybody else that was left, basically they raped and murdered, and then they stole the wealth of the town. I'm going to cover this up because there is a horrible scene here, and I just don't want to in case children are watching, it's like grotesque. So in any sense, they find the guy, and because he's still alive, and he had a chance to save some of the townsfolk because he found a gun, and he had a chance to do something. He didn't do anything about it. He was a coward. And he tried to make an escape, and they caught him, and then they tortured his family in front of him, which is what I'm covering up. But it's like rape kind of torture, and so I don't want to show it. And then he dies. And then this is him in some kind of purgatory. And he finds it says he finds his way blocked by the souls of his fellow townsfolk. But they're all like these demonic looking figures, and there's like this devil kind of character, right? So I don't really understand what that's about, other than maybe he thinks they're his townsfolk, but it's really the devil. And he gets sent back by this demonic figure. He comes back in the form of a comet really, and lands. And his job is to come back here and every night kill these men over and over and over again as his punishment. And it never stops. And then he goes by the graves of his family and, asks for forgiveness. And so the men get resurrected every night, and he gets resurrected every night to enact that vengeance. But it's the town of purgatory. It's purgatory. It's not heaven or hell. He's just stuck in this limbo. So pretty cool tale. Not bad. Again, the language is very flowery. Some of it probably not necessary, but it was good. I enjoyed it. And again, the artwork is just, we still have Dan Day doing the layouts and pencils, and David doing the inks. So speaking of, that was backwards. David Day doing the pencils and Dan Day doing the inks. So speaking of Dan, so one of the most popular comics that came out of Renegades was The Cases of Sherlock Holmes. So it was all actual tales from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that Dan Day illustrated in comic form. So I picked the first one up, and here's an ad for it, as you can see. The same level of detail that Dan Day goes after, just beautiful line work and etchings. It's got that 19th century feel. So it's perfect for Sherlock Holmes, correct? So I picked up the first issue, and unfortunately it's like an illustrated novel. It's not, it's a comic, but it's like an illustrated, prose of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories. So I was a little disappointed. I was like, oh man, I would like to have seen more. It's still cool. It's still beautiful. Don't know if I'll cover it. Maybe I will. But according to David Day, it was Renegade Press's highest seller. It's the book that actually did the best and kept them afloat for a while. And put Dan Day on the map, because after that he got contracted by Eclipse to do Aztec Ace, and he did like almost a full run of Aztec Ace. So that's like Dan Day's claim to fame. Really beautiful stuff, really beautiful. So this one, we still written by Kevin McConnell, but this is all David Day. So no Dan Day inks, and you'll see the difference. It's not better or worse, but it's different. David is not as hyper detailed, but we still get his incredible layouts. We get his dynamic character forms. Dan and David, it just drives me crazy. David, who does paintings now, remember that's the painter, when he inks, he leans a lot more on Gene's way of inking. Dan kind of went his own direction and went way more gothic. So this is actually all very boring. It's a letter that sets it up. It's written in that Victorian format, where a lot of Victorian stories are written as letters, and then they recount the incident in the letter. That was a lot of Victorian stories were written in that form. And it's basically just recapping, like just setting things up. And as you can see here, there's like zombies and things attacking the world, and this guy is saying that he's basically responsible for it. We get a little bit of like Will Eisner sort of text letters. That's logo action going on there. That's pretty cool. I really love the kind of crisscrossed layout of the road and the buildings, and it's almost like Tim Burton-esque. And that's one thing I really love about David. He is not afraid to just make things kind of wonky. Why not? Have fun on the page. I have a lot to learn from this in general in terms of just perspective, because normally when someone's doing perspective, you're so focused on finding that focal point and making everything fit within that focal point, whereas really you only need to do that kind of loosely, and then the rest you can just really have some fun, bring some character to the streets themselves and the buildings and the backgrounds, make those just as dynamic as the people. That's what makes a really good illustrator. So so we get this guy who is wandering in the woods, and he comes up to some sort of a abandoned church. And within that abandoned church, so he's like homeless, he's starving. You get the sense that he's been wandering in the wilderness for a while or escaping something. And he basically stumbles upon this old book. He's starving to death, but he finds this book, and it's this book of spells that's in this church. And basically explains how you can manifest whatever you want through various rituals. And the first one is you can manifest anything you want to eat by finding a corpse and giving the corpse a kiss. So there's a nearby mausoleum or what have you, I guess, in this particular church. And he digs up, gets a casket out and kisses a corpse. And then this weird panorama of like demonic energy happens. It's like really interesting, and not sure what's happening, but it's really cool. But basically it just is telling you that he was kissing the corpse made him sick with disgust. He falls into a fitful coma where he's haunted by the souls of those whose sleep he disturbed. So it's just this sense of like these souls are coming out to get him. And by the way, I'm not sure I like this on each page. That's kind of bugging me, but that's okay. And so then he wakes the next morning and finds some meat lying there for him, and he's able to cook it and eat it. So he's like, wow, so that's, a legit thing. Let's try this again. He goes in and he finds a story in that book to manifest all the wealth that he wants. And the way you do that is that you have to sleep. You got sleep in the coffin of a corpse's coffin, but take the corpse out, put on all of its garments, so you're taking its place, and then sleep in the coffin in its place. So he does that and wakes up the next morning, and there's all of these riches sitting there waiting for him, chest full of money, gold, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, well, I've gotten food, I've gotten riches, let's take this further. What can we do? I want all the power in the world, the power to be able to control life and death. And so the piece for that is to basically kill an innocent person. That's the spell or ritual for that. So we see him grabbing an axe here. We get David really trying to just play with the layout and do some different things. Get kind of a money shot. And then another money shot here where the groundskeeper of the nearby graveyard or whatever comes in, and then he attacks him, chops him up. So again, after doing that, he slips into unconsciousness, and then there's this whole kind of unconscious struggle that he has, and then he wakes up and all these corpses rise, and he sends all these corpses out into the world to supposedly destroy the world in his name. So we got some really cool freaking zombies here, got maggots and stuff crawling on them. David's doing a really great job. Love this beautiful work. And then he eventually gets all weirded out and abide and that like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've done this, you know, sort of thing, regret and shame. And he prays, and supposedly the way he can right all of his wrongs is to be killed himself. So all of the zombies come back basically to tear him apart and rip him to pieces. And that will set everything right. Like everything will go back the way it was, supposedly, according to this book. And so you think that's the end. But then you get this weird picture of him surrounded by a bunch of, not like full-on zombie corpses, but dead people at a table. And then you just get this montage of like a Columbo-type detective talking to you and explaining what really was happening. So apparently this guy on October 31st, killed his family and poisoned them to death. And then was put in a mental institution. And then a year later he escaped. And then he went to this church and where they were buried in the graveyard and pulled out all their corpses. And basically, it was seen that he was like puppeteering them. He was, you know, doing all kind of all the stuff in the story before. He was just mimicking all that. And the book he was actually reading was the Bible. And he was just making all this stuff up in his head. It wasn't really happening. So he was just kind of going crazy again, and then ended up killing himself because there were still poison or residue of poison in the corpses from before. And so when he kissed the corpse, the poison got into him and killed him. Which, even though the corpse was in there for a year, but I don't know. That's the story. Kind of cool. It's okay. I mean, I'm enjoying David Day's inks. The execution of the actual plot was a little like, all right. But not bad. And so then we get some cool pinups from David Day and Paul Lambeau, who is a really cool inker. So we just get some like random stuff. We got some cool 1950s sci-fi. We get this really cool pointillation type of ink work going on, almost like a deco sort of style of backgrounds. These cool aliens. This really neat image of this boy fishing and this huge monster coming out of the water instead of a fish. It's almost like Norman Rockwell-esque, that face. So it's just really interesting to see that we've seen David Day pencil this whole issue, and then to see the differences of those that are inking and the different qualities that become exhibited through the work that way. Really love it in this final one. It's really neat. Really neat. Rocketeer escapes Marvel. Because that happened. So yeah, really nice detail, gorgeous, and we get some cool ads. So this is actually Rick Geary. I mentioned him before. He's got a really excellent set of books. He's done a lot of educational things. He's actually a Kansas City artist, so a local guy for me. But he did a whole series of Victorian murder comics where he actually did like investigative pieces for Victorian murders. You know, he didn't do the investigating, but, you know, kind of took those different stories and then he, you know, just did comics of them. It's like they're really interesting and they're really well done, really detailed. And then we just get like ads for just more comics. Kafka, I did Kafka #1. Haven't done Mystery yet. I might do Mystery. But, you know, some cool stuff from Renegade came out, but that's it. So Shadows from the Grave was a great way to start the Halloween season for me. I might dig around and see about looking into some other horror comics to display soon. But you always know it's going to be the bottom of that dollar bin barrel for me, or 25-cent bin. So really appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for joining me. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. You can go to my Patreon and you'll get early screenings of these videos before they go public, as well as exclusive content for my next issue of Psychonaut Presents. I've got plenty of books for sale and merch in my shop. Check it out, links below. Thanks everyone, take care, stay safe, and keep it psycho.